The fork was halfway to my mouth when I saw it. My wife's hand wasn't resting on her wine glass where it should have been. No, it was sliding across the waiter's forearm, her fingertips tracing the ink that covered his skin like she was reading Braille, like she was memorizing every curve and line of those tattoos. The smile on her face wasn't the polite one she wore for business dinners or charity galas. This was different. Intimate. Real in a way she hadn't looked at me in years. The waiter leaned in as he poured her wine, and they shared something. A look. A smirk. The kind of silent communication that speaks volumes about familiarity, about inside jokes and secrets, about moments I wasn't supposed to know about. They thought I was oblivious. Just another successful, overworking husband too busy building his empire to notice what was happening right under his nose. Too trusting. Too stupid. What they didn't know, what she didn't know as she let her fingers linger just a second too long on his skin, was that every single camera in this restaurant streams directly to my office. Every angle, every corner, every intimate touch and whispered word. Crystal clear, high definition, archived and accessible. Because this isn't just any restaurant. This is mine. I own it. I built it from absolutely nothing. And I see everything. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well, wherever you are in the world right now. Maybe you're watching this from your living room, maybe you're on your lunch break, or maybe you're lying in bed wondering if you should trust your gut about something that doesn't feel right. I want to know. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this story ends. This is the kind of truth that doesn't show up in movies. This is real. This is raw. And this is happening right now. My name is Daniel Corleone, and I own 5 upscale restaurants across the city. 5 establishments that I built from the ground up with nothing but ambition, 80-hour work weeks, and a refusal to accept failure. The flagship location, the one where I'm sitting right now with my wife Isabella, is called Monarch. It's the crown jewel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, a menu that changes with the seasons, a wine list that sommeliers from 3 states drive here to experience. This place has been featured in every major food publication. We've got a 2-month waiting list for reservations. People propose here. They celebrate anniversaries and promotions and life itself here. I rarely visit anymore. That's the irony. When you own 5 restaurants, you can't be everywhere at once. You hire people you trust, you install systems, you monitor from a distance. I have managers and head chefs and an operations team that keeps everything running like clockwork. I'm usually at the office, reviewing reports, planning expansions, meeting with investors. Building the empire bigger. Always bigger. But tonight I decided to surprise Isabella. It's been a while since we've had a proper date night, just the 2 of us. Our marriage has become something of a performance lately, I won't lie about that. We show up to the right events together. She wears the right designers. We smile for the cameras at charity benefits. To the outside world, we're the perfect power couple. The self-made restaurant mogul and his beautiful wife living in a penthouse that costs more per month than most people make in a year. Behind closed doors, though, we're strangers who share a bed. Polite strangers, but strangers nonetheless. The conversations are surface level. The intimacy is scheduled, mechanical when it happens at all. We've become business partners in the enterprise of looking successful. And maybe I'm as much to blame for that as she is. Maybe I've been so focused on building this empire that I forgot to maintain what I was supposedly building it for. So tonight I thought maybe we could try. Really try. I made a reservation at my own restaurant under a different name, so the staff wouldn't make a fuss. I wanted it to feel normal, like we were just 2 people enjoying a meal, remembering what it felt like when things were good between us. Before the money. Before the success. Before everything became a transaction. Isabella looked beautiful when I picked her up. She always does. Long dark hair that falls in waves past her shoulders, the kind of effortless elegance that makes heads turn. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my first car, diamonds at her throat that I bought her for our anniversary last year. She smiled when she saw me, kissed my cheek, left a lipstick mark that she carefully wiped away with her thumb. All the right motions. All the right gestures. Like an actress who knows her role perfectly. We drove to Monarch in relative silence, her scrolling through her phone, me navigating the evening traffic. She didn't ask why I'd chosen this particular restaurant. Didn't seem curious about why I'd made a reservation instead of just calling ahead to my own establishment. She just accepted it, the way she accepts everything now, with a kind of passive contentment that comes from never having to worry about money or security or where the next luxury vacation will be. The host seated us at a table by the window, perfect view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled into night. The ambience was exactly what I designed it to be, intimate without being claustrophobic, elegant without being pretentious. Soft jazz playing just loud enough to set a mood without overwhelming conversation. The lighting was warm, golden, flattering. Isabella ordered a cocktail, something expensive and botanical that she sipped slowly while browsing the menu. We made small talk about her day, about her upcoming spa appointment, about some charity luncheon she was organizing. Surface stuff. Safe stuff. The kind of conversation you have with someone you don't really want to know anymore, but have to coexist with. That's when he approached our table. Kyle Draper. I'd seen his face in the employee files, of course. 26 years old, been working here for about 8 months. His application said he was an actor, doing restaurant work to pay the bills while auditioning. Tall, fit, the kind of conventionally handsome that gets you cast in commercials and background roles. Dark hair styled with that calculated messiness that's supposed to look effortless. And tattoos. Full sleeves on both arms, visible even under the white dress shirt and black vest that made up the server uniform. He had a smile that I'm sure has opened many doors for him. Confident bordering on cocky. The kind of guy who knows he's good-looking and has learned exactly how to use it. Good evening, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. My name is Kyle, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you folks off with some wine? Isabella looked up at him, and something changed in her face. A brightness. An animation that hadn't been there 30 seconds ago when she was talking to me. Actually, she said, her voice lighter, warmer. What would you recommend? I trust your judgment. The way she said it, the way she looked at him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Kyle leaned in slightly, close enough that it was unprofessional, and started describing the wine list with enthusiasm that seemed directed entirely at her. His hand rested on the table, inches from hers. She was leaning forward too, engaged in a way she never is with me anymore. Laughing at something he said about a Pinot Noir. Her eyes were bright. Alive. I watched it all play out like I was observing from a distance. The body language. The eye contact that lasted just a beat too long. The way his sleeve rode up slightly, and she reached out, fingertips brushing the edge of his tattoo. These are beautiful, she said softly. What do they mean? I could have said something right then. Could have cleared my throat, reminded her I was sitting right there, made my presence impossible to ignore. But something stopped me. Some instinct that told me to wait. To watch. To see exactly what I was dealing with before I made any moves. Kyle told her about his tattoos, some story about Japanese symbolism and personal meaning, and she listened like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. Meanwhile, I was invisible. A ghost at my own table in my own restaurant. He finally took our order. Isabella chose the sea base. I ordered the ribeye. Kyle wrote it down with a flourish, promised to take excellent care of us, and walked away. But not before exchanging one more look with my wife. One more smile that had nothing to do with customer service and everything to do with something else entirely. Isabella picked up her phone immediately, typing something quickly before setting it back down. She didn't look guilty. Didn't look caught. Just looked pleased with herself in a subtle way. Like she had a secret that made her happy. I excused myself to the restroom. But I didn't go to the restroom. I went to my office. It's tucked away on the second floor, accessible only by a private staircase behind the kitchen. The staff knows not to disturb me when I'm up there. It's where I handle the business side of things when I'm on site, where I review footage, where I make the decisions that keep this place running like a machine. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the security system on my computer. Monarch has cameras everywhere. Dining room, bar, kitchen, wine cellar, back office, every entrance and exit. It's necessary for security, for liability, for making sure my investment is protected. I can access the feeds from anywhere, but the office has the best setup. Multiple monitors. Clear audio on some of the cameras. The ability to review archived footage going back 6 months. I pulled up the feed from our table.
Zoomed in.
The image was crystal clear. I could see Isabella's face, see the way she was smiling at her phone. Could see Kyle approaching from the kitchen with our appetizers. Watched as he set them down, and she touched his arm again, deliberately, her hand lingering. Something twisted in my gut. Not quite pain. Not quite anger. Something colder. Something calculating. I switched to a different camera angle. Watched them from the side. Then from behind. Each perspective told the same story. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't a friendly interaction between a customer and server. This was familiar. Comfortable.
Practiced.
I leaned back in my chair and pulled up the archives. Started scrolling backward through the footage. If this was happening tonight, out in the open like this, how long had it been going on? And how careful had they been when they thought no one was watching? It didn't take long to find. 3 weeks ago. Isabella coming to the restaurant alone, claiming she was meeting a friend for lunch. I remembered because she'd mentioned it casually. Said she wanted to try my restaurants more, support my business, appreciate what I'd built. I'd thought it was sweet. Thoughtful even. I watched the archived footage. She'd sat at a corner table. Kyle had been her server. The meal had lasted 2 hours. They'd talked constantly. Her body language was open, leaning forward, laughing. When the dining room started to empty as lunch service ended, I watched Kyle slip into her booth across from her. Watched them talk for another 30 minutes. Watched him touch her hand across the table. Watched her let him. I felt my jaw tighten. Kept scrolling. 2 weeks ago. She'd come again. This time they'd been bolder. After her meal, I watched Kyle lead her toward the back of the restaurant. My fingers flew across the keyboard, switching cameras. They went to the wine cellar. It's a beautiful space, all exposed brick and soft lighting, designed to impress high-end clients during private tastings. It's also relatively secluded. The camera down there doesn't have audio, but I didn't need it. I watched Kyle back her against the wine racks. Watched her pull him closer. Watched them kiss like they'd been doing it for years. Long, deep, intimate. Her hands in his hair. His hands on her waist sliding down. They stayed down there for 20 minutes before emerging separately. She left through the front door. He went back to work with a smile on his face like he'd won something. 1 week ago. Another lunch. This time they barely pretended. He brought her meal, and when the restaurant emptied, they went to the wine cellar again. Same camera. Same story. Except this time it went further. I watched clothes get adjusted. Watched them move against each other with an urgency that made it very clear this wasn't new. This was practiced. Regular. Established. My wife. My employee. In my restaurant. For weeks. Maybe longer. I sat there in my office, the sounds of dinner service floating up from below, and felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak, exactly. The marriage had been dead for a while. I could admit that now. Maybe I'd known on some level. Maybe I'd just been too busy or too proud or too comfortable to acknowledge it. But this betrayal of trust, this disrespect, this arrogance to do it in my own establishment, under my own roof, with someone I paid, that was different. That was a violation on a level that went beyond marriage. It was a challenge to everything I'd built, an assumption that I was too stupid, too oblivious, too trusting to ever find out. The thing about building a successful business is that you learn very quickly not to act on emotion. Emotional decisions are how you lose money, lose respect, lose power. You learn to assess situations coldly, strategically. You learn to play the long game. You learn that the person who reacts first usually loses, and the person who controls their reactions until the perfect moment usually wins. I could storm down there right now. Could flip the table, confront them both in front of a restaurant full of diners. Could fire Kyle on the spot, drag Isabella out by her arm, make a scene that would be talked about for years.
But what would that get me?
Temporary satisfaction. Public humiliation for all of us. And probably a massive legal headache, depending on how good her lawyer was. Because Isabella didn't sign a prenup. I'd been too in love, too optimistic, too young and stupid when we got married to think I'd ever need one. I'd thought love was enough. I'd thought building a life together meant she'd actually care about that life.
No.
If I was going to handle this, I needed to be smart.
Strategic.
Thorough. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with, exactly what her plans were, exactly how deep this went. Because this didn't feel like just an affair. This felt calculated. The frequency, the location, the boldness. People having affairs usually hide them better. They're sneaky, paranoid, careful. This felt like something else. Like they wanted to get caught. Or like they didn't care if they did because they had something else planned. I needed more information.
More time.
More evidence. I needed to know if this was just physical or if there was something bigger happening. Financial plans. Legal strategies. Business sabotage. My restaurants were successful, but success made you a target. Made people think they could take what you'd built. I saved all the footage I'd reviewed onto a separate encrypted drive. Labeled it with dates and times. Evidence. Then I composed myself, straightened my tie, and headed back downstairs. When I returned to the table, Isabella barely looked up from her phone. Kyle had brought her entrees while I was gone. My steak sat cooling in its own juices. Her sea base looked perfect, professionally plated. She was picking at it delicately, still typing something on her phone with her other hand. "Everything okay?" she asked without looking at me. "Fine," I said, cutting into my steak. "Just had to take a call." She nodded, disinterested. Took a sip of wine. Glanced toward the kitchen like she was looking for someone. Kyle emerged a moment later with that practiced smile. "How is everything tasting tonight? Can I get you folks anything else?" "It's perfect," Isabella said, looking up at him with warmth. "You have excellent taste. The wine pairing is beautiful." "I'm glad you're enjoying it," he said, and they held eye contact for several seconds too long. I cut another piece of steak, chewed slowly, smiled. "It's great. Really, everything is excellent." Kyle nodded at me, but his attention was already back on Isabella. "Save room for dessert. We have a chocolate mousse tonight that's absolutely sinful." The way he said sinful. The way she smiled in response. If I hadn't already known, I would have figured it out right then. The subtext was so obvious it might as well have been written in neon. "We'll definitely get dessert," Isabella said. Not "we'll see," or maybe, but definitely. Because of course we would. Because that meant Kyle would have more reasons to come to our table. More opportunities for those loaded glances and careful touches, and whatever the hell else they were doing when they thought no one was paying attention. I played along. Finished my steak. Complimented the meal. Made easy conversation with my wife about nothing important. Watched her light up every time Kyle approached. Watched him play the role of attentive server, while his eyes told a completely different story. When dessert came, I watched her feed herself chocolate mousse with a silver spoon and moan softly about how good it was. Performative. Exaggerated. Meant for Kyle, who was watching from across the restaurant while pretending to clear another table. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. At the disrespect. At the sheer boldness of doing this right in front of me. But I didn't laugh. I smiled. Agreed that the dessert was incredible. Paid the bill with my card, left a generous tip on the receipt. Played the role of the oblivious, satisfied husband perfectly. As we left, Isabella turned back one more time. Caught Kyle's eye. Smiled. He smiled back. A whole conversation happening silently that they thought I couldn't see. I saw everything. In the car ride home, Isabella was on her phone again, typing rapidly, smiling at the screen. I didn't ask what was so interesting. Didn't want to tip my hand. Just drove through the city streets in silence, watching the lights blur past, my mind already working through scenarios and possibilities and plans. She thought she was so clever. They both did. Thought they were getting away with something. Thought I was just another rich, distracted husband too busy counting money to notice what was happening in his own life. What they didn't understand was that I didn't build 5 successful restaurants by being oblivious. I built them by paying attention to every detail, by seeing problems before they became disasters, by always being 10 steps ahead. And right now, while they were celebrating whatever they thought they were getting away with, I was already planning my next move. Because this game they'd started, they had no idea who they were playing against. The question wasn't whether I'd win. The question was how completely I wanted to destroy them when I did. The penthouse was dark when we got home, just the city lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Isabella kicked off her heels by the door, the way she always did, leaving them wherever they fell for someone else to deal with later. That someone was usually me, but I'd stopped commenting on it months ago. Pick your battles, they say. Save your energy for things that matter. She headed straight for the bedroom, already pulling out her phone again, her thumbs flying across the screen. I poured myself a scotch in the kitchen, good stuff, 25 years old, and smooth enough to drink neat. The kind of scotch I couldn't afford when I was building my first restaurant, back when every dollar mattered and failure wasn't just possible, but probable. People don't understand what it takes to build something from nothing. They see the success, the 5 restaurants, the penthouse, the lifestyle, and they think it just happened. Like I got lucky. Like I was born into money or connections or opportunities that just fell into my lap. The truth is uglier and more beautiful at the same time. The truth is I grew up in a neighborhood where restaurants were dollar menus and survival was the daily goal. My father worked in a factory until his body gave out. My mother cleaned houses until her knees couldn't handle the stairs anymore. They loved me fiercely, but couldn't give me anything except work ethic and the understanding that if I wanted a different life, I'd have to build it myself with my own hands. I started washing dishes at 15. Lied about my age to get the job. Worked nights and weekends while going to school during the day. The owner of that restaurant, a gruff Italian man named Tony who smelled like garlic and cigarettes, saw something in me. Maybe he saw himself at that age. Maybe he just needed cheap labor. Either way, he taught me the business from the bottom up. I learned every position. Dishwasher, prep cook, line cook,
Server.
bartender,
Host.
I absorbed everything like a sponge because I understood instinctively that knowledge was power, and the more I knew, the more valuable I became. I watched Tony manage the front and back of house, handle suppliers, balance books, deal with difficult customers, and even more difficult staff. I learned what worked and what didn't, what made money and what drained it. By 22, I was his assistant manager. By 25, I'd saved enough to put a down payment on my own place.
Small.
Tiny really. 40 seats, kitchen barely bigger than a closet, in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify.
I worked 100 hours a week.
Cooked, served, cleaned, did everything myself the first year because I couldn't afford to hire help. Slept 4 hours a night on a cot in the office. Lived on family meal and coffee. That's where I met Isabella. She came in one night with friends, a group of young professionals celebrating something, I don't remember what. But I remember her. Long dark hair, confident smile, the kind of beautiful that stops you mid-sentence. She'd noticed me too, I think. Or maybe she noticed that I was the owner, young and ambitious, going somewhere. Either way, she came back. Again and again. Started coming alone, sitting at the bar, talking to me while I worked. The courtship was fast. Intense. She made me feel like I'd already made it, like I was already successful just by virtue of having the courage to try. She believed in me, or at least she said she did. Encouraged me to expand. To open a second location. To think bigger. Her faith felt like fuel, like permission to want more. We got married 2 years after we met. Small ceremony, because I couldn't afford anything elaborate yet. I was still pouring every dollar back into the business. She said she didn't care about the wedding, just about the life we'd build together. Said she loved my ambition.
My drive.
My refusal to settle for ordinary. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was there through the hardest years, through the second location that almost bankrupted me, through the food critic that nearly destroyed my reputation with a harsh review, through the nights I came home exhausted and covered in kitchen grease. She was patient, supportive, or at least she played the part convincingly. The third restaurant was the turning point. That's when the money really started coming in. When the investors started circling. When the media attention picked up. When we moved from a modest apartment to a nice condo to eventually this penthouse that costs more per month than my parents made in a year. And somewhere in that transition, Isabella changed. Or maybe she just stopped pretending. The woman who said she didn't care about material things suddenly cared very much about what she wore, where we were seen, what kind of car she drove. The woman who encouraged my ambition started resenting the hours I worked. The woman who said she loved me for me started loving what I could provide instead. Our conversations became transactional. She wanted a vacation. I booked it. She wanted a new wardrobe. I gave her a credit card with no limit. She wanted to renovate the penthouse. I hired the designer she chose. Every request granted. Every wish fulfilled. And somehow the distance between us just kept growing. The intimacy died slowly. Then all at once, dates became obligations. Conversations became reports. How was your day? Fine. How was yours?
Phoenix.
Touch became rare, then scheduled, then mechanical. We had sex like we were checking off a chore on a to-do list. Efficient.
Joyless.
Something to get through, so we could both go back to our separate lives under the same roof. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages went through phases, that once the fifth restaurant was established and I could delegate more, we'd reconnect, find each other again, remember why we'd started this journey together. But watching her tonight with Kyle, seeing her come alive in a way she hasn't with me in years, I realized I'd been lying to myself. This marriage wasn't in a phase. It was over. Had been over for longer than I wanted to admit. We were just two people playing house, pretending for the benefit of appearances and shared assets and the complicated mess that divorce would create. I stood at the window with my scotch, looking out at the city I'd conquered, and felt nothing but cold calculations settling into my bones. She'd betrayed me. That was fact. The question now was what to do about it. I could confront her tonight. Show her the footage. Watch her scramble for explanations and excuses. But that would be messy, emotional, reactive. And I hadn't built this empire by being reactive. No, if I was going to end this, I needed to do it right.
Strategically.
With all the information, all the evidence, all the leverage firmly in my corner. Because Isabella had gotten comfortable. She thought the penthouse and the lifestyle and the credit cards were guaranteed. She thought I was too busy or too trusting or too invested in the image of our marriage to ever look too closely. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Marcus Hagen, my head of operations. Marcus had been with me since the second restaurant. Former military, incredibly loyal, and someone who understood the value of discretion. If anyone could help me navigate this situation strategically, it was him. Need to meet tomorrow morning. Early. My office. Important. His response came within seconds. 0700, I'll be there. I finished my scotch. Heard Isabella in the bedroom, probably still on her phone, probably texting with Kyle about how oblivious her husband was, how easy this was, how she had everything under control. Let her think that. Let them both think that. Because the best revenge isn't hot and messy. It's cold and calculated. It's planned with precision. It's executed when they least expect it, from an angle they never saw coming. And I had time. All the time in the world. Because they didn't know I knew. That was my advantage. My leverage. My weapon. I could watch. Gather evidence. Understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Figure out if this was just physical, or if there was something bigger at play. Financial motivations. Legal strategies. Business complications I hadn't considered. Knowledge is power. And right now, I had knowledge they didn't know I possessed. That made me dangerous. Made me the one in control, even if they thought they were the ones with secrets. I walked to the bedroom. Isabella was already under the covers, phone face down on the nightstand, the glow of her reading light casting soft shadows across her face. She looked up when I entered, smiled slightly. "Good night." "Yeah," I said, starting to undress. "The restaurant was good. Thank you for coming with me." "Of course," she said, picking up a book from her nightstand. Some best-selling novel she'd probably never finish. "We should do it more often. I forgot how nice your restaurants are." I almost laughed at the irony. She hadn't forgotten. She'd been there plenty, just not with me. "We should," I agreed, climbing into bed. "Maybe make it a regular thing." She nodded, already absorbed in her book, or pretending to be. We lay there in silence, two strangers sharing a bed, each with our own secrets, our own plans, our own versions of what came next.
She thought she held the cards. Thought she was playing me.
But tomorrow morning, I'd start building my case. And by the time I was done, she'd realized that she'd been playing checkers while I was playing chess. And in chess, you don't make a move until you've already won. Marcus Hagen showed up at my office at exactly 0700, punctual as always, carrying 2 coffees from the shop down the street. Black for him, cream and sugar for me, because after 3 years of working together, he'd learned my preferences. He was in his mid-40s, built like he still did military training despite being years removed from service, with a haircut that would pass inspection and eyes that never stopped assessing situations. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, handing me the coffee and settling into the chair across from my desk. "I didn't," I admitted, taking a long sip. The caffeine hit my system like a prayer answered. "I need your help with something. Something sensitive." Marcus leaned back, his expression neutral but attentive. "I'm listening." I pulled up the security footage on my computer, the monitors flickering to life with multiple camera angles from Monarch. "Last night, I took Isabella to dinner. At the flagship." I navigated to the footage, showed him the dinner table angle. "Watch this." I played him the sequence. Isabella's hand on Kyle's arm. The lingering looks. The body language that screamed intimacy. Marcus watched without expression, his jaw tightening slightly as the footage continued. "Now watch this." I pulled up the archived footage from 3 weeks ago. Showed him Isabella's solo lunch. Then the wine cellar. Then last week. The kissing. The touching. The escalation. When the footage ended, Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he looked at me. "How long have you known?" "Since last night. I saw them interact at dinner, and something felt off. Came up here to check the cameras and found all this." I gestured at the monitors. "I need you to help me figure out how deep this goes. Is it just physical? Is she planning to leave? Is there financial motive? Legal strategy? I need to know everything before I make any moves." Marcus nodded slowly. "Smart. Reacting emotionally would be messy. You're right to gather intelligence first." He leaned forward, studying the monitors. "Do you want me to tail them? See where else they meet? What they talk about?"
No.
"Not yet. I don't want to risk tipping them off." I pulled up Kyle's employee file. "Start here. I need to know everything about this guy. Background.
History.
Criminal record, if he has one. Financial situation. Who his friends are. What his social media looks like. Everything. Consider it done." Marcus pulled out his phone, snapping photos of Kyle's information from the screen. "What about Isabella? You want me to look into her activity too?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Bank accounts. Credit cards. Phone records if you can get them legally. I need to know if she's moving money, making plans, talking to lawyers. Anything that suggests this is more than just an affair." "I'll be discreet," Marcus promised. "What are you going to do in the meantime?" "Act normal. Go to work. Smile. Pretend I don't know anything." I pulled up another camera angle from last night, this one showing Kyle and Isabella's extended conversation. But I'm also going to review every second of footage from the past 6 months. If they've been meeting here, there will be a pattern.
Times. Frequency.
Whether it's escalating or plateauing. I need to understand the timeline. Marcus stood, pocketing his phone. "This is going to take a few days to pull together properly. Can you maintain the facade that long?" "I've been maintaining it for years," I said quietly. What's a few more days? After Marcus left, I sat alone in my office and began the tedious process of reviewing footage. I started 6 months back, before I'd found any evidence of the affair, and watched Isabella's visits to the restaurant on fast forward, slowing down when something caught my attention. The first appearance I found was 4 months ago. A Tuesday afternoon, slow lunch service. Isabella had come in alone, claimed to be meeting a friend who never showed. Kyle had been her server. I watched them interact, and at this point it seemed innocent, professional. He was attentive, but not inappropriately so. She was friendly, but not flirtatious. 3 weeks later, she came back. Same scenario. Alone, claiming to be meeting someone. Kyle served her again. This time the body language had shifted slightly. More comfortable.
Familiar.
They talked longer between courses. She laughed more. I made notes. Created a timeline. Documented each visit, each interaction, each escalation. By lunch, I'd confirmed she'd been coming to Monarch regularly for 4 months. Always on days when I was at one of the other locations or at the main office. Always during slow hours when the restaurant wasn't crowded. Always with Kyle as her server, which suggested either incredible coincidence or deliberate planning. The affair had been physical for at least 3 weeks based on what I'd found in the wine cellar footage. But the emotional affair, the connection, the groundwork that had been building for months. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was calculated, sustained, deliberate. The question was why? Why risk a marriage to a successful man who provided everything she could want? Why pursue a 26-year-old waiter with Hollywood dreams and no stable income? What was the appeal? Was it just excitement? The thrill of something forbidden? The ego boost of seducing a younger man? Or was there something else? Some plan I wasn't seeing yet? My phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Having lunch with Sarah. Be home around 3. Need anything? Sarah was her best friend from college, one of the few people from her past she still kept in contact with. They had lunch or went shopping a few times a month. It was a standing excuse, one I never questioned. But now I had to wonder, was she really with Sarah? Or was Sarah just convenient cover? I pulled up the security feeds from all 5 restaurants, scanning quickly through the current footage. She wasn't at any of them. That didn't mean she wasn't somewhere with Kyle. He wasn't working today according to the schedule. I texted back. No, I'm good. Have fun. Then I opened a new browser tab and logged into the location sharing app we'd set up years ago. It was supposed to be for safety, so we could find each other in emergencies. We'd both forgotten it existed, honestly. The app had been running in the background on both our phones for 3 years. Isabella's location showed her at a coffee shop across town, near the Arts District, nowhere near where Sarah lived or worked. I zoomed in on the map, my jaw tightening. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from Kyle's apartment. I knew this because his address was in his employee file, which I'd memorized this morning. So she was lying. Actively lying. Not just hiding an affair, but creating elaborate cover stories, using her friend's name, constructing a false narrative of her day. The betrayal deepened. Not just the cheating, but the lies. The calculation. The disrespect of thinking I was stupid enough to believe everything at face value. I took a screenshot of her location, saved it to my evidence folder. Then I went back to reviewing footage. By late afternoon, I documented 14 separate visits over 4 months. The pattern was clear. She came during slow hours, always at Kyle as her server, stayed longer than a normal meal would justify. The intimacy had built gradually, then accelerated dramatically in the past month. 3 visits ago, they'd started using the wine cellar. That was significant. It meant they'd gotten comfortable enough to take risks, bold enough to believe they wouldn't get caught, arrogant enough to do it in my restaurant, surrounded by my employees under my cameras. I switched angles, zooming in on their faces during one of the wine cellar sessions. Isabella looked happy. Genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. Alive. Present. Like she was exactly where she wanted to be. It should have hurt more than it did. Should have broken something inside me. But all I felt was cold analysis. Clinical observation. She was gone. The woman I married, if she'd ever really existed, was gone. This version of Isabella, this person who could lie and cheat and smile while doing it, that wasn't someone I could save or fix or win back. That was someone I needed to outmaneuver. My phone rang. Marcus. Tell me something good, I said by way of greeting. Kyle Draper, 26. Originally from Ohio. Moved here 5 years ago to pursue acting. Has had minor roles in commercials and background work, but nothing substantial. Currently shares an apartment with 2 roommates in the Arts District. Financial situation is precarious. Multiple credit cards near their limits. Behind on student loans. Car is leased and he's 2 payments behind. So he needs money, I said quietly, desperately. And here's where it gets interesting. 3 months ago, he started making regular deposits into his checking account. Small amounts, couple hundred here and there, but consistent. Cash deposits. My grip tightened on the phone. You think Isabella's paying him? Can't confirm yet, but the timing lines up with when their relationship seems to have intensified based on what you've shown me. I'm still digging into her accounts, but if she's pulling cash regularly, it would be hard to trace. What about criminal record?
Clean. No arrests.
Not even a speeding ticket. By all accounts, he's a good-looking kid trying to make it in a tough industry and not having much luck.
So he's vulnerable, I said.
Financially desperate. Probably flattered by attention from a beautiful, wealthy woman. Easy to manipulate. That would be my assessment, Marcus agreed. I'm still working on phone records and deeper financial analysis. Should have more by tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat staring at the monitors, pieces clicking into place. If Isabella was giving Kyle money, this wasn't just an affair. This was a transaction. She was buying something. Companionship?
Ego validation.
Or something more. I needed to understand her endgame. Because people like Isabella, people who grew up comfortable and married into wealth, they didn't risk their lifestyle without a plan. She had to believe she could have Kyle and keep the money. Had to think she could get away with this without losing access to the lifestyle I provided. Which meant either she was planning to hide the affair indefinitely, or she was planning an exit strategy that protected her financially. I pulled up our marriage certificate from my files.
No prenup.
That mistake haunted me now. If we divorced, she was entitled to half of everything. Half the restaurants. Half the assets. Half my life's work. Unless I could prove infidelity. Depending on how good her lawyer was, that might not even matter. Some states were no fault. Some judges didn't care about affairs when dividing assets. I'd need to consult with my own attorney, discreetly, to understand exactly what I was facing legally. But beyond the legal strategy, there was something else. Something personal. She'd humiliated me. Disrespected me. Done it in my own restaurant with my own employee. That wasn't just betrayal. That was a challenge. A statement that she thought I was weak. Oblivious. That she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. I'd built 5 restaurants from nothing by never letting anyone disrespect me. By establishing early and often that I was someone to be taken seriously. Someone who saw everything. Someone who always had a plan. Isabella needed to learn that lesson. Kyle needed to learn it too.
But not yet.
Not until I had every piece of evidence. Every financial record. Every text message. Every secret meeting documented and archived. Not until I understood exactly what they were planning and could counter it from 10 different angles. Patience. Strategy. Control. Those were the principles that had built my empire. And those were the principles that would protect it now. I checked the time. Isabella would be home soon from her fake lunch with Sarah. I needed to go back to the penthouse, smile, ask about her day, pretend I believed her lies. The performance was exhausting. But it was necessary. Because the best player in any game is the one no one realizes is playing. The next few days were a masterclass in restraint. Every morning I woke up next to Isabella, watched her go through her routines, smiled over coffee, kissed her goodbye when I left for work. She played her part too, the dutiful wife managing the home, planning her social calendar, living the life my success had built for her. Neither of us mentioned the growing distance, the lack of real conversation. The way we moved around each other like planets in separate orbits, never quite touching, never quite connecting. At night, I'd retreat to my office and review more footage. Marcus sent regular updates. The picture was getting clearer and more disturbing with each new piece of information. Kyle's bank deposits were consistent. Every week, $200 to $300 in cash. They started exactly 3 months ago, right when his financial situation was becoming critical. Right when eviction notices and final payment warnings would have been piling up. Isabella's credit card statements showed regular cash withdrawals. Same amounts. Same frequency. She was careful to spread them across different ATMs, different days, never creating an obvious pattern. But when you lined up the withdrawals with Kyle's deposits, the correlation was undeniable. She was paying him. The question was, for what exactly? Just his time and attention? Silence about the affair? Or was there a longer game being played? Marcus also pulled Kyle's social media, and that opened another window into the situation. Instagram showed the carefully curated life of an aspiring actor. Headshots. Behind-the-scenes photos from auditions. Motivational quotes about perseverance and dreams. But in the comments and tags, a different story emerged. Friends congratulating him on finally catching a break. References to being able to focus on his craft now that money isn't so tight. A post from 2 months ago showing him at an upscale gym he definitely couldn't afford on a waiter's salary, with the caption, "Investing in myself. Big things coming." His roommate's social media was even more revealing. Photos of Kyle out at expensive restaurants, wearing new clothes with designer labels still visible, drinks that cost more than their rent. One roommate had commented, "Must be nice having a sugar mama," with laughing emojis. So his friends knew. They might not know exactly who she was, but they knew he had a wealthy benefactor. The affair wasn't as secret as Isabella and Kyle probably thought. It was just secret from me, the one person they most needed to keep in the dark. I documented everything. Screenshots, bank records, timeline correlations. Built a file so comprehensive that no lawyer could dispute what was happening. On the 4th day, Isabella announced she was going to a spa day with Sarah. All afternoon, into evening. She kissed my cheek, told me not to wait up, that they might grab dinner after. I smiled, said I had work to catch up on anyway, told her to have fun. The moment her car pulled out of the parking garage, I accessed her phone's location again. She drove straight to Kyle's apartment building. I sat in my office, watching that little dot on the map stay stationary at his address for 6 hours. 6 hours while she told me she was at a spa. 6 hours while she thought I was too stupid or too busy to check. The rage that bubbled up was cold and focused. Not the hot, messy anger that makes people do stupid things. This was calculated fury. The kind that plans and waits and strikes when it will hurt the most. I called Marcus. I need surveillance on Kyle's apartment. I want to know every time she visits. How long she stays. If they go anywhere together. You sure you want to go down that road? Marcus asked carefully. The more you know, the harder this gets to ignore. I'm not ignoring it. I'm documenting it. Building a case. When I make my move, I want it to be airtight. Understood. I'll set it up tomorrow. That night, Isabella came home at 11, her hair slightly wet like she'd actually been at a spa, smelling like expensive lotion. She'd planned the cover story well. Even had a shopping bag from a boutique near the spa she claimed to have visited. How was it? I asked from the couch where I'd been reviewing restaurant financials. Wonderful. So relaxing. Sarah and I had the couple's massage, and then the facial treatment.
You should try it sometime.
You're always so tense. She set down her shopping bag, kicked off her shoes. How was your day?
Productive, I said.
Finalized some contracts for the new menu at the downtown location. Reviewed staffing numbers. The usual. That's good. She picked up her shopping bag.
I'm exhausted.
Going to shower and head to bed. I watched her walk away, every movement casual and comfortable, like she hadn't just spent 6 hours in her lover's apartment. Like the lies were as natural as breathing. How long had she been like this? Or had I just never paid close enough attention to notice? The next morning, Marcus installed discreet surveillance across from Kyle's building. Nothing invasive enough to be illegal, just external cameras that would capture comings and goings. Time stamps. Frequencies. Patterns. The data accumulated quickly. Isabella visited 3 times that week. Always during the day while I was supposedly at work. Always staying between 4 and 6 hours. She'd varied her cover stories. Shopping. Lunch with friends. Charity committee meetings. All easily verifiable if I cared to check, which she assumed I wouldn't. But I checked everything now. Called the charity organization. They confirmed she hadn't been to a meeting in 2 months despite being on the committee. Checked with the friends she claimed to be seeing. None of them had seen her recently. Every lie documented. Every false alibi recorded. At the restaurants, Kyle continued working his shifts, professional and charming with customers, probably believing he was getting away with the perfect scheme. Sleep with the boss's wife, get paid for it, and the stupid husband never finds out. I watched him through the security cameras, studied his interactions with staff, with customers, with Isabella on the nights she'd come in for dinner with me. He was good at his job, I had to admit. Charismatic. Attentive. The kind of server who could read people and give them exactly what they wanted. That skill had apparently extended to reading my wife, understanding what she was missing in her marriage, and providing it. For a price. On Saturday, Isabella suggested we have dinner at Monarch again. I really enjoyed it last time, she said. It's been too long since we appreciated what you've built. The irony was suffocating. But I agreed. Made a reservation. Played the grateful husband who appreciated his wife's interest in his work. Kyle was our server again. Of course he was. She'd probably requested him somehow, through some subtle communication I wasn't supposed to notice. I watched the whole performance with new eyes. The way she lit up when he approached. The way he leaned in just slightly too close when describing specials. The loaded glances. The carefully casual touches. Her fingers on his wrist when he poured wine. His hand resting on the back of her chair for just a second when he checked on our meal. And underneath it all, the smug confidence. The certainty that they were fooling me. That I was sitting there oblivious. Just another clueless husband too wrapped up in his own success to see what was happening right in front of him. I smiled. Complimented the food. Made easy conversation. Played my role perfectly. But inside I was calculating. Planning. Waiting for the right moment to flip the board and show them exactly who they'd been underestimating. Because that's the thing about playing the long game. You have to be patient. You have to let your opponents get comfortable. Let them think they're winning. Let them get arrogant and careless. And then, when they least expect it, when they're most confident in their victory, you remind them who's actually in control. I just needed a little more time. A little more evidence. A little more rope to let them hang themselves with. And then we'd see who was really playing who. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks into my investigation. Marcus arrived at my office with a folder thick enough to be concerning and an expression that told me he'd found something significant. "You're not going to like this," he said, skipping the pleasantries and dropping the folder on my desk. I opened it. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, and photographs. I started reading, and with each page, the situation revealed itself to be worse than I'd imagined. Isabella hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been planning an exit strategy. The emails were between her and a divorce attorney. Consultations that started 4 months ago, right when the affair with Kyle had begun. She'd been asking about asset division, about how to protect herself financially, about what evidence she'd need to ensure a favorable settlement. The attorney's responses were clinical and strategic. Without a prenup, Isabella was entitled to half of everything accumulated during the marriage. That included 3 of my 5 restaurants. The other 2 had been established before we married, but their increased value during the marriage would be considered marital property. The penthouse, the cars, the investment accounts, everything. But here's where it got darker. The attorney had advised her that if she could prove I was an absent, neglectful husband, that I prioritized work over the marriage, she might be able to argue for more than half. Maybe 60%. Maybe more depending on the judge and how sympathetic she appeared. And she'd been building that case. The emails referenced a journal she was keeping, documenting every time I worked late, every missed dinner, every business trip, every moment she could frame as abandonment or emotional neglect, creating a narrative where she was the victim of a workaholic husband who cared more about his empire than his marriage. The affair with Kyle wasn't just about passion or rebellion. It was calculated evidence. Proof that she'd been so lonely, so neglected, that she'd been driven into the arms of someone else. The poor, suffering wife pushed to infidelity by her husband's coldness. Never mind that she'd never expressed unhappiness. Never asked me to work less or spend more time together. Never suggested counseling or compromise. She'd just decided the marriage was over and started planning how to extract maximum value from the ending. "There's more," Marcus said quietly, pointing to another section of the folder. The photographs showed Isabella and Kyle at places that weren't his apartment or my restaurant. Upscale hotels. Expensive restaurants I didn't own. They'd been living like a couple, spending money freely, creating the foundation for a life together post-divorce. And the money she'd been giving Kyle wasn't just for his silence or his time. It was investment. She was setting him up, paying his debts, establishing him as a viable partner. Because she wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to leave me for him.
Publicly.
Definitively. The timeline in the folder showed her attorney had advised her to wait at least 6 months before filing. Build the case.
Document the neglect.
Let the affair establish itself as a response to abandonment rather than the cause of the marriage's failure. Make herself sympathetic. Make me look like the villain. She'd been 3 months into that plan. Halfway there. Confident enough to get sloppy, to bring Kyle around more, to take bigger risks. Because she thought she had time. Thought I was completely oblivious. Thought she was controlling the narrative. I closed the folder and looked at Marcus. "How did you get the emails?" "You don't want to know. Let's just say her digital security isn't as thorough as it should be." He paused. "The question is, what are you going to do with this information?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had evidence of infidelity, of calculated betrayal, of financial planning to destroy me. I could confront her now. File first. Use everything in this folder to protect myself. But something about it felt wrong. Too reactive. Too defensive. She'd been planning this for months, carefully building her case, creating her narrative. If I just filed for divorce now, even with all this evidence, it would still be messy. Still be he said, she said, in some respects. Still give her the opportunity to play victim in the court of public opinion, if not the legal one.
No.
If I was going to end this, I needed to do it in a way that left no doubt. No room for her to spin the story. No opportunity for her to walk away with anything except the consequences of her choices. I needed to let her think she was still winning. Let her continue building her case, getting more confident, taking bigger risks. And then I needed to dismantle it so completely that there was no recovery. "I need to talk to my own attorney," I said finally, quietly. "Someone who specializes in high-asset divorces. Someone who can advise me on how to protect the businesses and ensure she gets exactly what she deserves." Which is nothing. "I know someone," Marcus said. "Discreet. Ruthless. Expensive, but worth every penny. I'll set up a meeting." After he left, I sat alone with the folder, reading through the emails again. The calculated coldness of them was almost admirable in a sick way. She'd thought of everything. Every angle. Every potential complication. Except one. She'd assumed I'd never find out until it was too late. Assumed I was too busy or too trusting or too stupid to see what was happening until she was ready to pull the trigger. That was her mistake. Her fatal flaw. She'd underestimated me completely. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. "Having dinner with Lisa tonight. Don't wait up. Love you."
Lisa.
One of her society friends. Except I could check her location and know instantly whether that was true or another lie. I pulled up the app. Her phone was at Kyle's apartment building.
Of course it was.
I texted back. "Have fun. Love you too." The words felt like ash in my mouth. But they were necessary. Part of the performance. part of letting her think everything was still going according to her plan. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the folder Marcus had brought, memorizing every detail. The consultation dates, the advice her attorney had given, the timeline she was following, the specific evidence she thought she needed. Knowledge was power. And now I had knowledge she didn't know I possessed. That shifted everything. Made me the one in control, even though she thought she was pulling the strings. My own attorney, a shark named Rebecca Gambino, met with me the next day at a neutral location far from my restaurants or home. Marcus had been right about her. She was expensive, ruthless, and after hearing my situation, completely confident. She's building a classic abandonment case, Rebecca said, reviewing the emails. It's effective if the husband doesn't see it coming. But you do, which means we can counter every single move.
How?
First, we document your version. Every business dinner she attended, every vacation you took together, every attempt you made to spend time with her that she declined or ignored. We create a counter-narrative that shows she was an equal partner in the distance. I can do that. Second, we use the affair against her, not just as evidence of infidelity, but as evidence of her character. The financial support she's been giving Kyle, the lies, the calculated nature of it. We show she's not a victim but a strategic operator trying to manipulate the system. I have footage, bank records, everything. Rebecca smiled, sharp and predatory. Then we have everything we need. But here's my advice. Don't file yet. Let her file first. Let her shoot her shot with all the evidence she thinks she has. And then we bury her with what she didn't know we knew. It was risky. Waiting. Letting her make the first move. But it was also brilliant. Because if she filed first, thinking she had all the advantages, and then I countered with evidence that destroyed her narrative, it would be devastating. Complete. No recovery. How long should I wait? I asked. She's planning to file in 3 months based on these emails. I'd say let her get to about a week before she intends to file. Let her think she's about to win. Then we strike first, using all her own evidence against her, showing she was planning this while pretending to be the victim. I nodded slowly. So, I have to maintain this facade for 3 more months. Can you do it? I thought about the restaurants I'd built. The years of 18-hour days. The patience required to go from nothing to empire. 3 months was nothing compared to that. Yes, I said. I can do it. Over the following weeks, I played the role perfectly. Attended social events with Isabella. Smiled for photos. Held her hand in public. Kissed her goodnight. Pretended I believed every lie. And while I performed, I documented everything. Every business dinner she'd been invited to and declined. Every weekend I'd asked her to spend time together, and she'd had other plans. Every anniversary gift I'd carefully chosen while she'd given me generic watches and cufflinks clearly picked out by an assistant. I built my counter-narrative. Not emotional but factual. Dates, times, photographs, witnesses. A story that showed our marriage hadn't failed because I was absent, but because she'd checked out years ago, comfortable in the lifestyle I provided but uninterested in the partnership that came with it. Marcus continued surveillance. Isabella visited Kyle 3 to 4 times a week now. Staying longer. More comfortable. They were photographed together at places she thought I'd never hear about. Wine bars in neighborhoods I didn't frequent. Late-night diners. Movie theaters. They were building a life together, confident that in 3 months they could make it official. That she'd file, take half of everything, and ride off into the sunset with her young lover and my money. The hubris of it was stunning. The arrogance to think she could plan this in plain sight, and I'd never catch on. But that arrogance was also my weapon. Because confident people make mistakes. They get sloppy. They stop covering their tracks as carefully. And I was counting on that. 2 months into my waiting game, Isabella started getting bolder. Kyle came to the penthouse once while she thought I was out of town. Security cameras I'd installed caught them together in my own home, in my own bed. That should have broken me. Should have made me abandon the plan and confront them immediately. But it didn't. Because I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the man who acted on emotion. I was the man who won. And winning required patience. Just one more month. One more month of pretending, of smiling, of playing the fool. And then I'd show them both exactly what happens when you underestimate Daniel Corleone. The final month was hell in ways I hadn't anticipated. Knowing what I knew, having all the evidence locked away in encrypted files, and still having to wake up every morning next to someone actively plotting against me, it took a toll I wasn't prepared for. I started sleeping less. Maybe 3 or 4 hours a night, lying awake listening to Isabella breathe beside me, wondering how someone could be so convincingly affectionate while planning complete betrayal. She'd kiss me goodbye in the mornings with what looked like genuine warmth. She'd ask about my day with what sounded like real interest. She'd curl up beside me on the couch while watching television like we were still a normal couple. The cognitive dissonance was maddening. Was any of it ever real? Had she ever actually loved me, or had the whole relationship been transactional from the start? Had I just been a vehicle for the lifestyle she wanted, easily discarded once she found a more exciting option? The doubt crept in like poison. Not about ending the marriage, that decision was made, but about everything that had come before. About my judgment. About my ability to read people. If I'd missed this, what else was I missing? In my businesses. In my other relationships. In the foundation of everything I'd built. I started making mistakes at work. Small ones at first. Forgetting meetings. Losing focus during tastings for new menu items. Snapping at employees who didn't deserve it. Marcus noticed, pulled me aside one afternoon at the downtown location. "You're cracking," he said bluntly. "I can see it. Your staff can see it. You need to either move up the timeline or find a way to hold it together." "I'm fine," I said, but we both knew it was a lie. "You're not fine. You're running on rage and caffeine and about 2 hours of sleep. That's not sustainable." He was right. But what was the alternative? Confront Isabella early and risk her spinning the narrative? File for divorce before her attorney expected it and lose the element of surprise? Every strategy Rebecca had laid out required patience. I wasn't sure I had any more. That night, Isabella announced she was going to a charity gala, one of her society events that I usually attended with her. But this time, she said I didn't need to come, that she knew I was busy with the business, that she'd make excuses for my absence. "Are you sure?" I asked, playing the concerned husband. "I can make time if you want me there." "No, it's fine," she said, touching my cheek with fake tenderness. "You work so hard. Take the night off. Relax." She wore a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Diamonds I'd bought her. Perfume I'd given her for her birthday. All of it my money, decorating her for another man. I tracked her phone. She went to Kyle's apartment, not the gala. Stayed there for 4 hours before finally heading to the charity event for the last 30 minutes, just long enough to take photos for social media proving she'd been there. The brazenness of it pushed something past its breaking point in me. I poured a drink, then another, sat in my office at home, reviewing all the evidence for the 100th time, and felt something dangerous building in my chest. I could end this tonight. Could call her out. Could forward all the evidence to her phone and watch her world crumble in real time. Could fire Kyle with a single phone call. Could take immediate, satisfying action. My finger hovered over Isabella's contact. One call. One confrontation. One explosion that would destroy the careful facade we'd both been maintaining. But then I thought about Rebecca's advice.
About the strategy.
About the difference between winning and winning completely. If I reacted now, emotional and angry, Isabella's attorney would use it against me.
Paint me as unstable.
Volatile. Use my justified anger as evidence that I was difficult to live with.
No.
I had to hold. Just 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks and she'd file first, confident in her case. And then I'd destroy her. I put the phone down, finished my drink, went to bed alone and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a haze of performance and surveillance. Isabella's confidence grew. She stopped being as careful about covering her tracks. Stayed out later. Made less effort with her excuses. Like she could sense the end approaching and didn't care about maintaining the pretense anymore. Kyle requested more shifts at the restaurant, probably needing extra money now that Isabella was supporting him less, maybe planning for their future together. I approved every request. Wanted him there, visible, documented. Evidence continuing to pile up right until the end. I attended a business dinner one night with potential investors, and Isabella texted halfway through saying she was going to stay with her mother, who wasn't feeling well. Her mother, who lived 3 hours away. Her mother, who, when I discreetly checked, was perfectly healthy and hadn't heard from Isabella in 2 weeks. I smiled through the dinner. Closed a deal for a potential 6th restaurant. Shook hands and made small talk while my marriage burned down in slow motion and my wife was probably in bed with her lover. The investors commented on how successful I'd been, how impressive my empire was, how lucky I was to have built so much.
Lucky.
The word tasted bitter. What was luck worth when the person you'd shared it all with was counting down the days until she could take half of it? Late one night, unable to sleep again, I went to my office and pulled up the security footage from the penthouse. Watched Isabella and Kyle together in my home from 2 months ago. Watched them laugh and kiss and move through rooms I'd paid for like they owned them. The rage that surfaced was volcanic, pure and consuming. I wanted to destroy something, wanted to call them both right then, and unleash everything I'd been holding back. Instead, I called Marcus. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, the words coming out raw and honest in a way I usually didn't allow. 3 more weeks feels impossible. You can do it, Marcus said with absolute certainty. Because the alternative is worse. Reacting now, emotional and angry. That's what she expects if you ever find out. That's what her attorney is prepared for. But staying cold, strategic, waiting until the perfect moment? That's what will destroy her completely. That's what will protect everything you've built. What if I'm wrong? What if all this strategy is just me being afraid to face it? You're not wrong. And you're not afraid. You're smart. You've always been smart. That's why you have 5 restaurants, and the investors are already talking about a 6th. That's why you won before, and why you'll win now. His confidence steadied something in me, reminded me who I was. Not the betrayed husband spiraling in his office at 3 in the morning, but the strategist, the builder, the man who won because he thought 3 moves ahead. You're right, I said finally. I know I am. Now get some sleep. 3 weeks. You've got this. After we hung up, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went back through old photos from early in my marriage, looking for evidence that it had been real, that I hadn't completely misjudged everything. There were pictures of us at the opening of my 2nd restaurant. Isabella beaming beside me, champagne in hand, looking genuinely proud. Photos from our honeymoon in Italy, both of us younger and seemingly happy. Images from random moments throughout the years where her smile looked real, where the connection between us seemed authentic. Had it all been performance? Or had something real died slowly under the weight of success and distance and mutual neglect? Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Maybe the why was less important than the what. What she'd done. What I was going to do about it. What came next. I closed the photo albums. Shut down the computer. Went back to bed as dawn was breaking and managed 2 hours of fitful sleep before my alarm went off. 19 days left. 19 days of holding the facade together. 19 days until Isabella filed for divorce, confident she'd built an unbeatable case. And then 0 days before she learned exactly who she'd been playing against. I could last 19 days. I'd survived worse to build this empire. I could survive this to protect it. The shift happened 12 days before Isabella planned to file. Marcus called me early on a Tuesday morning, his voice carrying an edge of excitement I rarely heard. Get to your office.
Now.
I found something. When I arrived, he had his laptop open, displaying financial records that made my pulse quicken. I've been digging deeper into Kyle's background like you asked, and I found something interesting. 5 years ago, he was sued by a former girlfriend for fraud. He borrowed $15,000 from her, promised to pay it back. Never did. Case was settled out of court, but the documentation exists. So, he has a history of using women for money. It gets better. Marcus pulled up more documents. 3 years ago, another woman filed a restraining order. Claimed he'd become aggressive when she tried to end their relationship. The order was temporary and eventually dropped, but again, the documentation exists. I leaned forward, studying the records. Why didn't this show up in his background check when we hired him? Because neither case resulted in criminal charges. Just civil disputes. Your standard background check wouldn't have flagged it. You'd have to dig specifically into court records, which most employers don't do for service positions. But Isabella wouldn't know about this either, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. She thinks she's leaving me for a struggling artist with a good heart. She has no idea he has a pattern of exploiting women financially.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. Marcus pulled up Kyle's recent bank statements. Those cash deposits from Isabella? They stopped 2 weeks ago. But his spending hasn't decreased. He's still going out, buying things, living above his means. Which means he's found another source of income. Another woman? That would be my guess. I'm still tracking it down, but yes. He's playing your wife the same way he's played others. And when she files for divorce and expects him to be waiting with open arms, she might find he's already moved on to his next mark. A laugh escaped me, cold and genuine. It was almost poetic. Isabella thought she was using Kyle, paying for his companionship and discretion. But Kyle was using her too, building his financial situation so he could move on to the next opportunity. They were both players in a game neither fully understood.
This changes things, I said.
How so? Because it's not enough for me to just divorce her and protect my assets. I need her to understand the full scope of her mistake. And what better way than to let her discover on her own that Kyle was never the prize she thought he was? You want to expose his pattern to her? Eventually. But not yet. First, I want to find out who his new target is. Document it the same way we documented him with Isabella. Because when this all comes out, when the divorce is filed and the evidence starts flowing, I want her to realize she didn't just lose our marriage. She lost it for a con artist who was playing her the whole time. Marcus grinned, sharp and appreciative. That's cold. She earned it. Over the next week, Marcus's team tracked Kyle's movements outside of work. It didn't take long to identify his new interest. A woman named Sophia, late 30s, divorced, independently wealthy from a tech startup sale. She'd been coming into Monarch regularly, always sat in Kyle's section, and based on surveillance footage, they'd already progressed beyond professional interest. The pattern was identical, Kyle being charming and attentive, the woman responding to his attention. Private conversations, phone numbers exchanged, and based on Kyle's bank records, coffee dates and dinners that he definitely couldn't afford on his own. He was running the same play. Find a wealthy woman. Make her feel special. Let her rescue him financially. Stay until the resources dried up or something better came along. Isabella wasn't special. Wasn't chosen. She was just the most convenient mark at the right time. Armed with this information, I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had been consuming me, the hurt that had been keeping me awake at night, it transformed into something colder and more focused.
Clarity.
This wasn't really about me and Isabella anymore. Our marriage had been dying for years. The affair was just the symptom, not the disease. We'd both checked out, just in different ways. I'd buried myself in work. She'd found comfort elsewhere. But the betrayal, the calculated planning, the arrogance to do it in my own restaurant with my own employee while spending my money and using my home, that was about disrespect. About thinking I was too stupid to notice or too weak to respond. And that I could not accept. I called Rebecca. I think we should move up the timeline.
Why?
What changed? I explained what Marcus had found. Kyle's history. His current pursuit of another wealthy woman. The fact that Isabella was being played as much as she thought she was playing me. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then laughed. Oh, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Yes, let's move up the timeline. Instead of waiting for her to file, we file first. This week. Catch her completely off guard. And when she scrambles to respond, we bury her with everything. Won't that give up the element of surprise? No, because she's not expecting you to know anything. She thinks she's still 3 weeks away from her carefully planned filing. She thinks she has time to prepare. By filing now, we force her to react instead of act. And people make mistakes when they're reactive. It made sense. And more importantly, it meant I didn't have to maintain the facade anymore. Didn't have to pretend. Didn't have to sleep next to someone who was counting down the days until she could destroy me.
Do it, I said.
Draw up the papers. I'll sign whatever you need. There's one more thing we should consider, Rebecca said.
Kyle.
He's your employee. You have grounds to terminate him for conducting a relationship with a client that compromised your business. But if you fire him now, before the divorce is filed, Isabella's attorney might use it as evidence of you being vindictive or unstable. So, we wait to fire him until after?
Exactly.
File for divorce. Let the initial shock play out. Then, once the legal proceedings are underway, terminate his employment with full documentation of policy violations.
It's cleaner that way.
More defensible. I agreed, though part of me wanted to fire Kyle immediately just for the satisfaction. But Rebecca was right. Strategy over satisfaction. Always. That night, I had dinner with Isabella one last time. She was in a good mood, talking about some upcoming trips she wanted to plan, maybe to Europe in the spring. Talking about our future like it existed. Like she wasn't days away from filing papers to end everything. I listened and nodded, and realized I felt nothing.
No anger. No hate.
Just a kind of distant observation, like watching a play where you already knew the ending. You seem different, she said at one point. Lighter somehow. Less stressed. Just feeling good about where things are heading, I said honestly. She smiled, reaching across the table to touch my hand.
I'm glad.
You work so hard. You deserve to feel good. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. But I smiled back. Squeezed her hand. Played the role one last time. Because tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she'd be served with divorce papers she wasn't expecting. Tomorrow, she'd realize that the husband she thought was oblivious had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. Tomorrow, the game would finally be over. And I would win. The papers were served at 9:47 a.m. I know because I was tracking the process server's location on my phone, watching that little move through the city toward our penthouse where Isabella was enjoying her morning coffee and probably texting with Kyle about their future plans. I was in my office at Monarch, Marcus beside me, Rebecca on speakerphone. We'd prepared for every possible reaction, every legal maneuver, every emotional response. The folder of evidence sat on my desk, organized into sections with tabs and summaries. Bank records, security footage, emails with timestamps, Kyle's history, everything. My phone rang at 9:52. Isabella's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Then again. Then a text came through. Call me right now. I waited 5 minutes, watching the phone light up repeatedly before finally answering. Hello. What the hell is this? Her voice was shaking, but I couldn't tell if it was rage or fear or shock. Did you seriously just serve me with divorce papers? Yes, I did. Without even talking to me first? Without giving us a chance to work things out? What is wrong with you? The audacity was almost admirable. She was actually trying to play the victim even now. Isabella, we both know there's nothing to work out. This marriage has been over for a long time. So your solution is to blindside me with legal papers? To treat me like I'm nothing after everything we've built together? Everything I built, I corrected quietly. And I'm not treating you like nothing. I'm treating you exactly as you've treated me. There was a pause. What does that mean? It means I know. I've known for months. About Kyle. About the affair. About your plans to file for divorce. About the attorney you've been consulting with. About the narrative you've been building to paint me as the neglectful husband. I know everything, Isabella. The silence on the other end was absolute. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally, but her voice had lost its confidence. Kyle Draper, 26. Waiter at Monarch. You've been sleeping with him for 3 months. Giving him money. meeting him at his apartment 3 to 4 times a week. You even brought him to our penthouse, our bed, while planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've built. You're insane. I have footage, Isabella. Security cameras at the restaurant, at the penthouse. I have bank records showing the cash withdrawals you've been making and the deposits going into his account. I have the emails with your attorney. I have documentation of every lie you've told, every fake lunch with friends, every fabricated excuse. I have everything. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. How long have you known? Long enough. Long enough to build a case that will ensure you walk away from this marriage with exactly what you contributed, which is nothing. You can't do this. Her voice was rising again, panic creeping in. I'm entitled to half. We were married for 6 years. You're entitled to nothing. Not after what you've done. My attorney has prepared a divorce settlement that accounts for your infidelity, your financial manipulation, and your calculated planning. You'll be lucky to leave with your personal belongings. No judge will. Every judge will. When they see the evidence. When they understand you weren't some abandoned wife driven to infidelity, but a calculating opportunist who planned this while living off my success and using my resources. You lost, Isabella. The moment you underestimated me, you lost. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline flooding my system. But underneath that was something else. Relief. The weight that had been crushing me for months, the pretending and the performance and the rage, it was lifting. Marcus was watching me with approval.
Clean, he said.
Professional. Perfect. Rebecca's voice came through the speaker. She'll call her attorney now. They'll scramble to respond. But without knowing we have her emails, they'll lead with a neglect narrative, which is when we bury them with evidence of her planning. How long until the first hearing? 30 days, probably. But expect her attorney to reach out before then to negotiate. Once they understand what evidence we have, they'll want to settle quietly rather than have this play out in court. The phone rang again. Isabella. I declined the call. Then Kyle's number popped up. I declined that too. Over the next hour, I received 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Isabella went through the classic stages. Denial, anger, bargaining. The text started with accusations and threats, then shifted to apologies and promises, then back to anger. I responded to none of them. At noon, Marcus reported that Isabella had gone to Kyle's apartment. His surveillance confirmed she arrived in tears, stayed for 2 hours. Kyle looked panicked in the external footage, clearly not expecting his comfortable situation to implode so suddenly. What they didn't know yet was about Sophia, about Kyle's pattern, about the fact that he was already lining up his next opportunity. That revelation I was saving. 3 days later, Isabella's attorney reached out to Rebecca requesting a meeting. The tone was professional but notably less confident than the emails I'd seen from months ago. They wanted to discuss settlement terms before proceeding to court. Rebecca scheduled it for the following week, giving us time to prepare the presentation of evidence. She was going to walk Isabella's attorney through everything chronologically, showing not just the affair but the calculated planning, the financial manipulation, the lies. Build an overwhelming case that made fighting in court look like suicide. The night before the meeting, I finally allowed myself to go back to the penthouse. Isabella had been staying with a friend according to the restraining order that required us to remain separated during proceedings. The space felt different without her. Emptier but also cleaner somehow. Like removing a source of toxicity. I walked through rooms where she'd brought Kyle, where they'd laughed and planned and thought they were getting away with everything. Felt nothing but mild disgust. Whatever hurt had been there was gone, replaced by satisfaction that justice was finally being served. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Kyle. I need to talk to you.
Please.
I can explain. I almost deleted it without responding. But curiosity won. Explain what exactly? It wasn't what you think. Isabella pursued me. She was lonely, and I was stupid. I never meant to hurt you, or disrespect your business.
I need this job. Please don't fire me.
The shamelessness was stunning. Trying to paint himself as the victim. The poor young man seduced by the older, lonely wife.
Please.
You're right about one thing. You were stupid. The job is gone. The relationship you threw away your integrity for is over. Isabella's being played by you the same way you played other women. There's nothing to explain except that you're a con artist who picked the wrong mark. I attached screenshots of his history. The fraud case. The restraining order. The evidence of him currently pursuing Sophia while still involved with Isabella. She doesn't know about any of this yet, I added. But she will. Just like everyone will. Actions have consequences, Kyle. You're about to learn that lesson hard. I blocked his number before he could respond. Whatever he had to say, I didn't care. He was collateral damage in a bigger war. A cautionary tale about what happens when you disrespect someone who built an empire from nothing. The meeting with Isabella's attorney was exactly as brutal as Rebecca had promised. She walked through the evidence methodically, showing the affair timeline, the financial records, the emails proving premeditated planning. Isabella sat across the conference table, her face pale, her expensive clothes and jewelry suddenly looking like costume on someone playing a part they couldn't maintain. Her attorney, a woman named Patricia who'd seemed so confident in the emails, looked increasingly deflated as the presentation continued. When Rebecca showed the footage from the wine cellar, Patricia actually winced. "This is quite comprehensive," she said finally. "I think perhaps we need to reconsider our approach." "There's more," Rebecca said, and presented Kyle's history. The pattern of using women. The evidence of him already pursuing someone new. Isabella's face crumpled as she saw the surveillance photos of Kyle with Sophia, timestamps showing dates, when Isabella thought she was his only focus. "He was playing you," I said quietly. "The whole time. You weren't special. You were convenient. A wealthy woman he could exploit until something better came along." "Shut up," Isabella said, but there was no fire in it. Just broken resignation. Patricia looked at her client, then at Rebecca. "What are your terms for settlement?" Rebecca slid a folder across the table. "My client keeps all 5 restaurants, all business assets, the penthouse, and his personal accounts. Isabella receives $50,000, her personal belongings, and signs an NDA preventing her from discussing the marriage publicly. She waives all claims to business interests, property, and future earnings." "That's insane," Patricia said. She's entitled to nothing," Rebecca interrupted. "And you know it. This evidence shows calculated fraud and manipulation. If this goes to court, she'll be lucky to get the $50,000. We're being generous with the offer. Take it or watch your client get destroyed in public proceedings." Isabella was crying now, quiet tears that I felt nothing watching. This was her doing. Her choices. Her consequences. "I need to speak with my client privately," Patricia said. Rebecca nodded. "You have 48 hours to respond. After that, the offer is withdrawn and we proceed to court." We left them in the conference room. In the hallway, Rebecca turned to me with a satisfied smile. "That went perfectly. They'll accept. Patricia knows she has no case. And if they don't, then we bury them in court. But they will. Isabella's smart enough to know when she's beaten." The response came 36 hours later. Isabella accepted the settlement terms. All of them. She'd sign the NDA, take the $50,000, and disappear from my life forever. Rebecca had the papers drawn up within 24 hours. We met one final time, this time with just attorneys present. Isabella didn't come. Couldn't face me, probably. Patricia signed on her behalf with power of attorney, her expression professionally neutral but her disappointment visible. When it was done, when the papers were filed and the marriage was officially dissolved, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph exactly. Not even satisfaction. Just closure. The weight I'd been carrying for months, the anger and hurt and betrayal, it was finally over. I went to Monarch that night, my first time back since the divorce was finalized. The staff didn't know the full story, just that I'd gone through a separation. They were professional and respectful, giving me space while making sure I knew they were there if needed. Kyle had been terminated the day after Isabella accepted the settlement. Rebecca was right about the timing. His employment was ended for violation of company policy regarding relationships with customers and for compromising the business's reputation. He'd fought it initially, threatened legal action, but his attorney had advised him that fighting would only bring more public attention to his pattern of behavior. He'd left quietly, escorted out by Marcus, his swagger completely gone. I'd heard through various channels that Isabella had moved back to her hometown, living with family, while she figured out her next steps. The $50,000 wouldn't last long given her spending habits. She'd have to get a job, budget, live like a normal person for the first time in years. Kyle had been fired from 2 subsequent restaurant jobs when his history started circulating through the industry. Turns out the restaurant community is small, and people talk, especially about servers who sleep with the boss's wife. He'd probably have to leave the city entirely to escape the reputation. Both of them had gambled that they were smarter than me, that I was too busy or too trusting or too stupid to see what was happening. And both of them had lost everything because of that arrogance. I sat at the bar, Marcus joining me with a drink. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Weird," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel more victorious. But mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been in crisis mode for months. Now that it's over, the adrenaline crash hits." "Yeah." I sipped my drink, looking around the restaurant I'd built. You know what the strangest part is? I don't even hate her anymore. I'm not angry. She made her choices. She faced the consequences. It's just over. "That's growth," Marcus said. "Means you're ready to actually move forward instead of just being in reaction mode." He was right. For months I'd been focused on the immediate crisis. Protecting myself, building evidence, winning the divorce. But I hadn't thought much about what came after. Now, sitting in my restaurant with my empire intact and my marriage finally, officially over, I had to figure out what forward actually looked like. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I found myself in a place I hadn't expected. Not bitter. Not closed off. Just different. More aware. More careful. But also strangely optimistic in a way I hadn't been in years. The restaurants were thriving. Without the distraction of a failing marriage and a wife's betrayal hanging over me, I'd thrown myself back into the work with renewed focus. Not the obsessive, all-consuming focus that had contributed to the distance between Isabella and me, but something healthier. Passionate but balanced. I'd promoted from within at Monarch, elevating my sous chef to head chef and bringing in a new floor manager who understood that the restaurant was more than just business. It was community. A place where people celebrated life's important moments, where proposals happened and anniversaries were marked and families gathered. The 6th restaurant I'd been planning opened in the spring. Not another upscale establishment, but something different. A neighborhood place with reasonable prices and a welcoming atmosphere. The kind of restaurant that would have meant everything to my parents when I was growing up. The kind of place that proved you didn't need to be wealthy to deserve good food and quality service. I named it Sophia's, after my grandmother, who'd taught me to cook when I was a kid. She'd passed away before seeing what I'd built, but this felt like honoring her memory. Keeping the foundation of why I'd started this journey in the first place. Marcus had become more than just head of operations. He was a true friend, one of the few people who'd seen me at my lowest and hadn't judged. We had dinner once a week, sometimes talking business, sometimes just talking about life. He'd started dating someone, a teacher he'd met through mutual friends, and watching him happy reminded me that moving forward was possible.
I'd also started therapy.
Rebecca had suggested it, noting that while I'd handled the divorce strategically, I should probably process the emotional aspects with a professional. I'd resisted at first. Successful businessmen don't need therapy, right? But eventually agreed. Dr. Sarah Chun was in her 50s, direct but compassionate, and she didn't let me hide behind business strategy and intellectual analysis. She made me confront the hurt underneath the anger. Made me acknowledge that Isabella's betrayal had wounded more than just my pride. That losing a 6-year marriage, even one that had been dying, was worth grieving. "You protected yourself brilliantly," she said during one session. "But protection and healing are different things. You can't strategize your way through grief." She was right. I'd won the divorce, protected my assets, came out the other side with my empire intact. But I'd also lost something. Not Isabella specifically. That relationship had been over long before the affair. But the idea of partnership. The belief that someone could love you for you, and not what you provided. That's not gone, Dr. Chen said. It's just wounded. And wounds heal, if you let them. I also reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while building the business. College buddies I hadn't seen in years. Mentors from my early restaurant days. People who'd known me before the success, who remembered the kid washing dishes and dreaming big. Tony, my first boss who'd taught me the restaurant business, came to the opening of Sophia's. He was in his 70s now, retired but still sharp. He walked through the space with tears in his eyes. "You did good, kid," he said, gripping my shoulder. "Really good. Your grandmother would be proud." Those words meant more than any 5-star review or business accolade ever could. I also made changes in how I ran the businesses. Implemented better work-life balance for staff. Created clear policies about workplace relationships and boundaries. Made sure everyone understood that the restaurants were professional environments where people were valued and protected. Several employees came to me privately after Kyle's termination, sharing that they'd felt uncomfortable with how he'd operated but hadn't known how to report it. That broke something in me. The idea that my own staff hadn't felt safe coming to me with concerns. I created an anonymous reporting system, brought in an HR consultant to establish better protocols. Made it clear that the culture of my restaurants would be one of respect and safety, not just good food and service. The changes rippled through all 5 locations. Staff turnover decreased. Applications increased. The quality of service improved because people felt valued and heard. And slowly, carefully, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just coffee with a woman I met at a charity event. Dinner with someone a friend had introduced me to. Learning how to be social again without the weight of a failing marriage hanging over me. Some dates went well. Some didn't. But I was learning to read people better. To see red flags I'd missed with Isabella. To understand the difference between someone who liked what I could provide and someone who liked who I actually was. I met Jennifer on a random Tuesday at Sophia's. She was there with friends, celebrating a promotion at the nonprofit where she worked. I'd stopped in to check on the opening week, make sure everything was running smoothly. She was at the bar when I came out of the kitchen, laughing at something the bartender had said. Dark hair, warm smile, the kind of presence that drew people in. When she ordered, she asked questions about the menu that showed genuine interest, not performance. I found myself drawn over, introducing myself as the owner. She seemed impressed, but not starstruck. Asked about the grandmother the restaurant was named after, what had inspired the menu, why this neighborhood. We talked for 20 minutes before her friends called her back to their table. She smiled, thanked me for the conversation, started to walk away. "Wait," I said. "Would you want to have coffee sometime? I'd love to continue this conversation." She looked at me for a long moment, assessing. Then nodded.
Sure.
But actual coffee, not some elaborate dinner at one of your fancy restaurants. Just coffee. I laughed. Just coffee. I promise. We met 3 days later at a small cafe neither of us owned or worked at. Talked for 2 hours about everything except restaurants. She told me about her work helping underprivileged kids get access to education. I told her about growing up without much, about my parents who'd worked themselves to exhaustion. She didn't ask about my net worth or how many restaurants I owned or what kind of car I drove. She asked about my grandmother's recipes, about what I did for fun, about whether I'd ever traveled just for pleasure and not business. It was refreshing.
Real.
Easy in a way that made me realize how hard everything with Isabella had been, even in the beginning. We dated slowly. Coffee turned into dinners, but at normal places, not always my restaurants. Movies and walks through the city. Meeting each other's friends. Getting to know each other as people, not as roles we were supposed to play. 3 months in, she met Marcus and his girlfriend for dinner. Afterward, Marcus pulled me aside. "She's different," he said. "Good different. Real." "Yeah," I agreed. "She is." You happy? I thought about it. Was I happy? The divorce was still relatively fresh. The betrayal still stung sometimes when I thought about it. I'd lost years to a marriage that had been built on shaky foundation. But I'd also learned things. About myself. About what I actually wanted versus what I thought I should want. About the difference between success and fulfillment. Yeah, I said finally. I think I am. Or at least, I'm getting there. Jennifer never asked for details about my divorce. She knew it had happened, knew it had been difficult, but she didn't pry. Didn't try to fix me or save me or make it her mission to heal my wounds. She just existed beside me, present and patient, building something new that wasn't weighed down by all the baggage of the past. One evening, 6 months after we'd started dating, we were at my penthouse. I'd been nervous about bringing her there, the space still carrying memories of Isabella. But Jennifer had walked through it with interest and appreciation, not judgment. "This is beautiful," she said, looking out at the city lights. "But it doesn't feel like you." "What do you mean?" "It's impressive. Expensive. Shows success. But it's not warm. Not personal. Like a showroom instead of a home." She was right. The penthouse had always been Isabella's domain. Her decorator. Her style. Her need to impress. I'd just paid for it. "Maybe I should change it," I said. "Make it actually feel like mine." "Or," Jennifer said carefully, "maybe you move. Start completely fresh. Find a place that's yours from the beginning." The idea hadn't occurred to me, but as soon as she said it, it felt right. This penthouse was beautiful, but it was haunted. Not by ghosts, but by memories and mistakes, and a version of myself I was moving past. Within 2 months, I'd sold it and bought a loft in a different neighborhood. Industrial but warm. Exposed brick and large windows and space that felt creative rather than corporate. Jennifer helped me furnish it, but she was careful to make sure I made the decisions. This was my space. My fresh start. She was just there to offer opinions when asked and support when needed. The first night I spent there, I stood at the window looking out at a different view of the same city and felt something shift inside me. The weight that had been lingering, the last remnants of anger and hurt and betrayal, they finally released. I'd won the divorce, protected my empire, came out the other side stronger and smarter. But more than that, I'd learned who I actually was without the performance, without the need to prove anything, without the weight of a relationship that had been wrong from the beginning. I'd learned that success, without genuine connection, was hollow. That an empire meant nothing if you had no one real to share it with. That vulnerability wasn't weakness, but the foundation of something actually worth building. Isabella had tried to destroy me.
Kyle had tried to use me.
And they'd both failed because they'd underestimated who I was and what I was capable of protecting. But they'd also, inadvertently, freed me. Given me the opportunity to rebuild not just my life but my understanding of what life should actually be. I heard Jennifer in the kitchen, making tea, humming to herself. Not performing. Not trying to impress. Just existing comfortably in a space we were slowly making ours together. This, I thought. This is what it's supposed to feel like. The restaurants were thriving. The businesses were expanding. The empire I'd built from nothing was stronger than ever. But more importantly, I was thriving too. Not just surviving or strategizing or protecting. Actually living. Actually happy. Actually building something real with someone who saw me as a person, not a bank account or a lifestyle provider. I walked back to the kitchen, wrapped my arms around Jennifer from behind, kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For being real. For being patient. For helping me remember what actually matters." She turned in my arms, smiled up at me. "You did the hard work. I just showed up."
Still.
"Thank you." We stood there in my new kitchen in my new home, building a new life that wasn't haunted by the past. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt completely at peace. The game was over. The war was won. Not just the divorce or the protection of my assets, but the bigger battle. The one for my own identity and happiness and future. Isabella and Kyle had thought they were playing me. But in the end, They just cleared the path for something actually worth having. And that, more than any legal victory or financial protection, was the real win. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this story. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From that first moment of betrayal to the final victory and new beginning. If you're still watching, I'd love to know what you thought. Drop a comment below telling me how you would have handled the situation differently. Would you have been as patient as Daniel? Or would you have confronted them immediately? And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We share stories like this every week, stories about real human experiences, about overcoming betrayal, about justice and redemption, and finding yourself again after everything falls apart. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you're going through, you're stronger than you think. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up being the ones who set you free. Until next time.